Well, good afternoon, everybody. Trust you had a great lunch. Welcome to this year's installment of Conversation with the CEO. We're very pleased today to have one of our leading CEOs in Jamaica, Mr. Bruce Bowen, the president and CEO of the Scotiabank Group here in Jamaica. This is Hermage at 30. Our conference theme this year, No Limits, Winning Through Transformational Leadership and Partnership. Let me tell you a little bit about what we'll be doing in our conversation today. I'll be asking Bruce Bowen a few things about himself, about his professional practice, and then we want to open the floor. And I'm sure you have many questions. You're not allowed to ask any questions about mortgage or interest rates or anything like that. It's all about Bruce this afternoon. Bruce Bowen has been the president and CEO of the Scotiabank Group Jamaica Limited since November 1 in 2008. He came from Puerto Rico, where he held a similar position. He's Canadian, but he's quite a Caribbean man. He's married to a Caribbean woman. And he has not just worked here in Puerto Rico, but he has worked here, he's working here, and he has also worked in the Cayman Islands and, of course, Trinidad and Tobago. He's a formidable banker. I met him last week, and I was very impressed with how he ran his operations, from the little I could see. And I also learned from the pre-interview that Bruce Bowen is quite a devoted family man, married to Suzanne, and I'm very happy to acknowledge Suzanne Fernando Bowen, who's also here. Suzanne, would you stand so that the conference could see you? This is his beautiful wife, who he tells me gets him on page 2 ever so often. Welcome to Hermage at 30, Bruce.
Thank you.
And thank you for accepting our invitation. I know it's been a very harrowing time today. You've been traveling, and you really kept your promise by being with us this afternoon. Certainly you have one of the most demanding jobs in private industry today. What's a life like in the day of the president of BNS?
Sure. I'm not a real early morning person. Those that get up. Suzanne and I always have breakfast together. It's one of the things that we make a point of always doing. I work long hours in the evening, so as a result, I'm not one of those people in the office at 7 or 7:30 a.m. Now, my executives that are here, they are. I know they're in there good and early.
Someone is going to do it.
Yeah. When I can, I try and exercise in the morning. I big into balance. I try and make sure we spend enough time with the family, spend some time personally, make sure.
How well do you do that? How well do you balance?
As time goes on, I think better. You're young in your career and you start off and you spend more time on work than you probably should. But you learn over time, that you can burn yourself out if you just focus too much just on the job. So I think, I've developed tools or ways to make sure that does happen. Part of it is that I bring Suzanne when I have to travel. Most times she travels with me and, becomes that person who tells me if I'm talking nonsense and those kinds of things. So you need someone with you who honestly will tell you those types of things. But the days are long, though. In the office, usually functions afterwards. In my position, most of my job and where I can be most effective is in communication roles, whether that's communication with our staff, with the employees, amongst our executive and senior management team about just reinforcing priorities, with the government, with the community. We've got exceptional people. It's one of the advantages of a large organization and where you can afford to have the best talent. The executive can run the business, and so as the CEO, I mean, obviously you get involved in some of the day-to-day, but most of the real impact you can make is being out and communicating to the different interest groups inside and outside, and making sure you're keeping people aligned on vision, on strategy, and feeling good about the organization. So.
Okay, day in the life of Bruce Bowen. But tell us a little bit about your early days in Canada. We don't know much about those days. You told me earlier that you were quite an all-around guy in school, quite an A achiever academically, but wanted to be a sportsman of sorts.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, we talked about the fact that I was, one of those people who were sort of good at everything, great at nothing. So I played almost every sport there was. Was good enough to get on the.
You sound like Colin Barnett.
Yeah, good enough to get on the high school or university team, but always second string, never first string. So, but tried a lot. So enjoyed that. Academically, did well. It was one of the. I'm not sure. At least in high school, it was that I worked that hard at it, but found I developed a knack for figuring out how to do well on tests. So not that I worked at it. So anyway, so did okay.
You want to share any little tips with any of us?
Anyways, there's an art to multiple choice tests. So.
There is.
Okay. Yeah, or a science to it.
I hear the rise of anticipation in the audience. They want to hear just about that. What's your formula there? But your concept of family and balance, clearly something very, very important to you, and a constant thread in your life. You have 5 children, 6 women in your life.
Yeah.
In your life.
That's the 5 children and my wife. 5 girls and my wife. There's not. So that's where the 6 women come from.
Tell us a little bit about the family.
Yeah.
You don't have to begin with Suzanne, but if you wish.
Yeah. In the end, family has to be, I think it's important you put things in perspective, God, family, your work. And we all work amazingly hard. But, when you're faced with challenges or decisions you have to make with children, we work on it. We always sit back and say, if we're going to invest in anything, your children is what you should be investing in. I think it's something that God puts us on this earth to make sure that at the end of our parenting, that our children are pointed in the right direction, doing the right thing. We try and show them a lot of love. Great kids. People never believe us, but we have 5 girls between 19 and 32. All doing different sorts of things, so they're not young at this point. And no one ever believes it, but that's all right. We have pictures to prove it. So. But they're great, and they're all doing amazingly well.
What are they doing?
The youngest 2 are in their 2nd year of college. One in Vancouver, one in London, England. Next eldest is just finishing her university degree, University of Toronto. The second eldest, who's 26, was an accountant, decided that she didn't want to be an accountant. She's in the middle of a 4-year traditional Chinese medicine program in, that's a huge change, in Toronto. And well, actually one of the twins, I think, is the one she's the one who is always trying to get everyone in the family to play Monopoly, because she cleans up every time we all play. So she's the one who's going to be the banker. And then the eldest was an engineer, but she's now chemical engineer. She's now in kind of the health and beauty field. So again, a big change. She actually worked for Ray Nephew here when we were living here 99 to 2003. So she's a chemical engineer.
Wow.
So,
and you feel pretty good about that, right?
Yeah. I mean, they're all successful. And more than anything, they enjoy what they do, because life's too short if you really don't like what you're doing. Well, obviously engineering and accounting, and then what they've ended up in, maybe we did push them a little harder than we should have into those first 2 fields. But they're happy with what they're doing.
Excellent. Now let's talk about your your leadership over the years as a banker, what would you consider, if you could distill your years of experience, what has been your formula for success?
I have a very participatory style. I try as much as possible amongst a leadership team to come to consensus. I'm a firm believer that I don't have the answers to everything. I think when you're early in your career, you can, but when you get to a more senior level, you just can't know everything. So you have to rely upon good people, try and keep open communication, people understanding the vision, and then try to build consensus. If anything, I do that to an extreme. I more often look back and say, gee, I couldn't get consensus, I should have quicker moved to just force a decision than the other way around. So I'm very much consensus, trying to invest in people to maximize their potential. Again, we've got great people who know their areas of the business much better than I do. And as a leader, then it's trying to keep people aligned with the vision, communicating openly, and inspired to perform well. So,
what's your vision for BNS? What do you go and tell the troops every day when you lead them?
With our position in the our mission, our objective is to provide quality products, services, so that our customers are financially better off at the end of the day from interacting with us. We have delivered that in Jamaica and in most of the markets that we've been in historically through sort of one channel, one set of products and channels for all of our customers, which is the branch channel and basic banking products. Where I see us going is a much more segment-specific model, in that you're going to have some very high-value customers who want very sophisticated products, and you reach them through a different channel. There's what is the majority of our customer base today, which deals in a branch, and we're able to provide banking, insurance, investments products. And then there's a near bank segment, or the lower end of the market, that today are in our branches. I don't think are the most efficient and efficient for us or effective for them of interacting. So how can we find better channels, better designed products that we can help them be financially better off and still be profitable to us. So it's that channels aligned with market segments, so that we aren't trying to force the wrong products, the same products to all customers. So it's a customization of channel delivery.
Okay, great. I have a little checklist here that I want to walk you through.
Sure.
As a CEO. Your perspective on excellence and performance.
Sure. If there's an area I read a lot about, and I'll be honest, I don't read about a lot outside of business. My relaxation is more sports. But when I do read, it's about the area of excellence. I've always been fascinated why, for example, in sports, why is one athlete the best in the world, but someone else is the 10th? Because when you get to that level, technical ability is typically not the differentiation. It's who has the passion, who can stay focused, and it translates to organizations as well. What makes that great organization or good organization being absolutely the best in their field? And again, because I think that's not the things that you can sit down, come up with a strategy and put in place. That's something that's in the heart of your people. And I'm fascinated with how, as a leader, do you bring that to an organization? And if anyone gets the formula, I'm sure you can make millions, but it's a real interesting area. interesting field.
Continuing the checklist, honesty and integrity.
I mean, well, I was going to say especially in banking, but in all business, I think, I mean, your vision, your strategy, the culture of your organization is all defined by your values. You know, I believe you've got to be true to those values that you hold. You know, when faced with difficult decisions, and I give this advice, you know, to our children, to other leaders, to people in all kinds of activities, you know, when you're faced with a difficult decision, I think the first thing you've got to step back and say, okay, you know, take my ego out of this. What is the right thing to do here? And if you can center yourself on that, it points you usually in the direction pretty clearly of the right decision to make on things. So, you know, I will often, when faced with things I'm unsure of, just sit back and say, okay, you know, not what's best for me, what is best for the organization and the other people, and that usually leads you to the right decision.
So you listen to that still small voice.
Yeah, absolutely. So.
More perspectives on cultural diversity. You've been able to integrate pretty well into Caribbean society. How did you do it? What's your view on it?
I mean, you need a certain amount of flexibility and recognizing that people approach things all kinds of different ways. On the other hand, I mean, people are people. You know, people, I think, fundamentally look for the same thing. We all want to feel, you know, self-worth. We all want to contribute to something larger than ourselves. We all, I mean, we're a gregarious species, right? You know, we interact, and if people feel comfortable and feel trusting, you know, you can connect with people of all kinds of cultures. So, I mean, I think it's important as a person, as a leader, you know, what are your strengths, what are the areas I shouldn't be or if not weaknesses, what are the areas that I shouldn't be focusing on? And I mean, I'm a good communicator. I mean, that's the feedback everyone gives me. So, and I can relate to people one-on-one.
How did that help you in integrating in Caribbean society?
Well, I think that's the critical factor, is being able to, you've got to be able to relate to people to embrace diversity. Yeah.
Okay. Now, when we were talking earlier, you mentioned this notion, call it a notion of leadership brand. Michael Jones and I had a little talk about that after, this notion of leadership brand. What is your leadership brand? What keeps you focused and passionate? How would you define yourself as a leader?
I mean, people focused, trying to, I mean, I believe I'm perceived as honest and upfront, even if sometimes that isn't saying what people expect. You know, be honest and upfront with people, that people believe that I care about people, so, and not that you aren't going to make tough decisions, but that you do look at the human factor and try to do the right thing, trying to inspire people. While there's always the kind of the stick and the carrot, there's always sometimes that you need, you know, strong accountability and pushing people. In the end, I think you get most out of your people when you can inspire them, which involves a certain amount of lifting them up. So that's certainly what I would. That's what I think people. That's the way I perceive myself, and most feedback that I get from people. Yeah.
You talk about making tough decisions, and within that, maybe dealing with controversies.
Sure.
You're the head of BNS. Controversy will follow you, and you can't get around it, I'm sure. You had to assume the helm of BNS at a pretty difficult time back in 2008, about this time 2 years ago.
Yeah.
The larger-than-life Bill Clark was head of the bank. At one point, he was your boss.
Yeah.
And he was at that point, around this time last year, 2 years ago, leaving the bank in the context of lots of publicity was attached to it. And it was quite an acrimonious separation.
Sure.
Why were you the man selected to come into the maelstrom, into the hurricane, and to usher in this new ethos of leadership at BNS?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know exactly why. I mean, I think the fact that I'd been here before, that I knew and respected Bill. I've got great respect for the man. Our styles are very, very different, but I don't believe there's one leadership style. People can be effective with different ones. Because I'd been here before, there was sufficient people here who knew me that it, I think, would cut down on the amount of, well, who's this? What are they going to do? Is it something I should be afraid of? I mean, you always get that in any change, but I think it minimized that both inside the bank with the staff in the bank and outside in the business community and government. There were people there who, if not a lot, there were people there who knew me who'd be able to reassure people and say, well, you know, I don't think he's going to...
He's a nice guy.
He's not a bad guy. So that probably helped.
So retrospect, back 2 years, what were the first things you did coming into the eye of the hurricane to deal and treat with and settle the company? What did you...
I mean, I don't think, to be honest, I don't think it was as difficult or as big a deal as a lot of people thought it was going to be. You know, people do work for the organization, and even though when you have a larger-than-life leader, you know, people all the time, I've heard, when I left Puerto Rico, I mean, people saying, oh, you know, I can't imagine working for anyone other than you. Well, you know, 2 weeks from now, you'll be working for someone else.
With whoever they said.
You know, and so, you know, people recognize that it is a large organization. It's a part of a global organization. There will be, you know, a leader. People may have wondered, will I be a good, effective, or not leader? But, and again, there was a lot of people I knew, so you know, you didn't have to. I didn't have to spend as much time building trust as, for example, when I went to Puerto Rico, when none of the senior management team knew me. And again, a situation where someone had retired and I'd come in. It was much more work to get them comfortable. So, I mean, after this, I'm sure my executive could say better, but I don't think it was a bit of anticlimactic. I don't think, you know, aside from when you'd end up in the press over something. Yeah, I mean, and your job, remember, is you try to. I very much tried to say, look, that's something that is out there, and that's not my issue. You know, my job and the senior leadership team's job is there's a large, successful organization we need to run, and you know, if we just focus on doing that, you know.
How are things now?
Good.
Ah. Okay.
Good.
I'm not going to probe any further.
Things are always good.
Things are always good. Okay.
Things are continuing.
Okay, so that was your first big deal. You said it wasn't such a big deal. You had to deal with that, settle the organization.
The more challenging deal was dealing with all the lead up to the IMF agreement and all of that was...
JDX and all of that.
Yeah,
Tell us a little bit about that. What was BNS's role in all of that?
Well, I mean, as the largest creditor to the government, they could not have done the transaction without us, or a few other players as well. And in something that important, it's easy to take adversarial views, and I know that there was actually one point that some of the smaller players in the industry had thought, well, gee, we need to retain our own, the financial system should retain a company who can negotiate and have lawyers and that with the government. And, you know, myself and the other largest financial players, basically NCB and Sagicor, the three of us, you know, said, look, nothing effective is going to happen here if we're like at each other. Let's understand that even though we're coming from different perspectives, our interests are aligned. You know, none of us win if the country fails, and all of us lose if it does. You know, so let's sit down and figure out how we do what needs to happen for the country. And you know, there's a bit of enlightened self-interest in that, because if not, if we all keep fighting and it just implodes and JDX or something like it doesn't work and there is no IMF standby agreement, we're all worse off. So in the end, a big portion of the financial sector, I wouldn't say agreed, but knew that behind the scenes, the three large institutions were talking to the government about how to effectively make it happen. And to be honest, they showed a lot of restraint on the basis that our message was, you know, again, our interests are the same, so we can do this so it makes sense for the financial sector. Everyone should, the negative impact should be minimized on people. So it was trying to be very real, very honest, blunt behind the scenes, but come up with a win, as close to a win-win situation as we can.
And the JDX has been celebrated all over the world as one of the biggest
It's done
deals.
better than any of us who were sitting around the table would have thought it did.
And you feel good about that and the role you played?
I mean, I feel good that it was successful. I don't think we should be proud of the fact that a situation got to the point that the country needed to do it. I think that is a sign of the problems we had. The other thing is, and this is part of my messaging now as I talk to the government and other things, remember, it was never an end unto itself. The JDX and the IMF agreement, there was no money in the IMF agreement to get the country growing. All it was is to settle things down, give a breathing space for the country to get back on its feet. So we've been very successful in getting breathing space. What we now need to focus on is how we get the country growing again. And that needs more focus, in my view.
And talking about that and the economy, you're clearly very invested in the Jamaican economy and that it grows. Your bank and the banks in general have been accused over the years of these taking too great a spread, high interest rates, these exorbitant banking fees. I seem to have a lobby there in the audience.
Yeah.
That's a controversy that dogs your bank. How do you deal and treat with that?
I mean, I could talk about this for, based upon the different audience, well.
These are HR people. They're
you know, the